Given that this is Lent, I thought it would be appropriate to kind of set the stage, if you will, on some ways we can use this grace-filled opportunity that the church provides us every year. And really, that captures the essence of what Lent is. It is an opportunity for grace, an opportunity to empty ourselves of ourselves and fill our soul with our Lord. That's what Lenten observances are for. They are a means by which we can conform our will with the Lord's. And while that's easy to say, yes, Lord, only you, I give myself to you, all of me, everything, I'm your empty vessel. Because we are weak, it's always much harder when it comes time to actually follow through on our sentiments, isn't it? The rich young man from the gospel found that out when Jesus looked at him with love and said, "You lack one thing. Sell all that you have and give it to the poor, and then come follow me." And the young man went away sad. Jesus asks the same thing from you and me. He wants that one thing we don't want to give up. Perhaps we're not even sure what it is. A hurt from long ago, anger at someone, a selfishness that only we know about, anxiety about the world, a secret sin that we've hidden for years and never laid at his feet. Let's not waste this opportunity to make our hearts more like the heart of our Lord and Our Lady. What do I mean by that? Let's face it, does giving up chocolate for Lent really draw anyone closer to God? It's time to grow up. Let's resolve to give up that one sin. Let's resolve to do charitable works for Lent. Let's be Catholics mature in our faith and move toward the perfection our faith calls us to. And in that regard, I'd like to draw your attention to a source of grace, a path to perfection that isn't talked about much. In fact, I can't think of a single time I've heard anything about it from the pulpit. I'm talking about indulgences. A source of great graces that is just waiting for us to tap into. Indulgences? Didn't those go out with the Middle Ages? I thought the Church did away with those at Vatican II. Hardly. Indulgences are alive, if not well known. But to really understand indulgences, we first need to understand what sin is. Sin is not about rules, it's about relationships. Sin is not about rules, it's about relationships. Specifically, our relationship with God. And if we sin deliberately and our sin is serious, that is, mortal, we actually cut ourselves off from God. This has two consequences, one eternal and the other temporal. The eternal consequence is the guilt we incur by deliberately damaging or destroying our relationship with God. This can result in spending an eternity in hell, or as the Catechism puts it, can result in the definitive self-exclusion from God. Mortal sin, however, can be forgiven and our relationship with God restored through sacramental confession. But even though the sin has been forgiven, something is still not right. That's the temporal consequence of sin. Our sin, whether great or small, has literally upset the order of the universe. An order God himself ordained, and this order must be restored. This disorder results in a suffering for us and often for others as well. This is the temporal consequence. That is the temporal punishment due to sin. But this punishment is not vengeance. Rather, it's restorative. It's intended to heal what caused the relationship to be broken in the first place, our disordered will. If our will and God's were the same, then what room would there be for sin? None at all. Therefore, the temporal consequence of sin, the punishment, or suffering, if you will, is really a purgation of our will, a removing of all that is contrary to the will of God. Perhaps you've heard this illustration. A young boy carelessly throws a baseball through the neighbor's window. He's truly sorry and is forgiven. But the window's still broken and needs to be repaired and paid for. We tend to think, but I've been forgiven. Why should I still be punished? Well, for one thing, if your heart was in the right place, in justice, you would want to pay for the window. If you don't, if you want to get out of that, then that's all the more evidence that the moral order is still damaged. Your heart isn't where it should be. That God gives us the means to do so through acts of faith and charity confers on us the dignity of participating in the means of our own perfection. The Catechism puts it this way: the forgiveness of sin and restoration of communion with God entail the remission of the eternal punishment of sin, but temporal punishment remains. While patiently bearing sufferings and trials of all kinds, and when the day comes, serenely facing death, the Christian must strive to accept this temporal punishment of sin as a grace. He should strive by works of mercy and charity, as well as by prayer and various practices of penance, to completely put off the old man and to put on the new man. Now, we can either resent this suffering, this purgation, this punishment, if you will, or we can accept and cooperate with it. But the fact is, the ordering of our will to God's will take place either in this life or in purgatory. Speaking of purgatory, you may, like a lot of Catholics, think it's practically impossible to avoid purgatory. What did St. Therese of Lisieux, a doctor of the Church, think about that? Once St. Therese found out that her novices had discussed among themselves about how they expected they would have to go to purgatory. She corrected them, saying, "Oh, how you grieve me. You do a great injury to God in believing you're going to purgatory. When we love, we can't go there." This is where indulgences come in. They are a means the Church provides to put off completely the old man and to put on the new man. The grace we receive through indulgences teach us to love and remove the temporal punishment due to sin. They enable us to go straight to heaven. Where do these graces come from? They come from the infinite treasury of merits our Lord earned through his passion, as well as the good deeds and our suffering for the sake of the kingdom. An indulgence is either plenary or partial. That is, it frees a person from all or some of the temporal punishment due to sin. The Church is especially generous with partial indulgences. You only need be in the state of grace and do the indulgenced work. For example, simply raising our minds to God and making, at least mentally, a pious invocation gains a partial indulgence. One night, I was trying to fix our dryer, a particularly onerous event for me, not being mechanically inclined. And at an especially trying time during the repair, I looked to heaven and said, "Lord, have mercy." That simple act, through God's merciful grace, remits some of the punishment due to my sins, but more importantly, helps me to become ever more conformed to our Lord's will, who saw God's hand in all the circumstances of life, even repairing a dryer. To gain a plenary indulgence, you must perform the work prescribed for the indulgence and meet the following conditions. Say an Our Father and Hail Mary for the Pope's intentions. Receive Holy Communion. Go to confession. And be free from any attachment to sin, even venial sin. The prayer for the Pope, communion, and confession may be done several days prior or several days following the indulgenced work. Spending 30 minutes in adoration carries with it a plenary indulgence. We do that every week here. Think about it. We have a weekly opportunity to go straight to heaven. What more could we ask for? But there is more. The Church allows us to apply any indulgences we might gain to the poor souls in purgatory. Doing this is a true act of Christian charity. Doing this truly demonstrates love of neighbor. There are about 70 acts of devotion and prayers that are indulgenced. Devotions like making the sign of the cross, reading the scriptures, saying the rosary, all have indulgences, both plenary and partial, attached to them. You can get the official book of handbook of indulgences online, or get it free off the internet by simply downloading it. There's lots more that could be said about indulgences, but what I want to leave you with is that our Lord, through His church, has given us so many ways to obtain the graces we need to be Christ to the world, to be like Him. Let's take advantage of every opportunity. Let's use all the spiritual weapons we have at our disposal to fight the good fight. During this Lenten season, let's begin to use indulgences to obtain the graces we need for the good of our own soul and for the benefit of the poor souls in purgatory.